Hello friends, welcome back to the Prince Armory Academy. In this video we'll be finishing the leather Berserk armor and crafting the breastplate and tassees. If you're new to this channel, welcome. This is part of an ongoing series designed to show you how to build the armor seen here, as well as crafting tips and techniques that you can use in any of your own builds. For our returning viewers, please bear with me as I'm going to do a mini recap of some of the fundamental crafting steps so that our new viewers can get the most from this video. I will also explain some of the products that we're using as we go. The leather I chose for this armor is Weaver Select Vegetable Tanned Leather. This is 9 to 10 ounces, or around 4 millimeters, and we use this to build most of the parts of the suit. I would call this a good medium weight for leather armor. It has a good balance of density and workability. It will hold the shapes that I give to the armor without it feeling too thin and flimsy, and it'll also be a comfortable weight for recreational wear. The first thing I'll do is to lay out the leather to prepare it for cutting. I'll trim away some of the rough edges that I know I won't use for anything else. Most of the tools and materials that you'll see us use for this build can be found at our longtime sponsor, Weaver Leather Supply. Just follow the link in the description to check out their online store. If you're cutting this project by hand, our patterns come with PDFs that you can scale and print at home. You would arrange them onto the leather at this stage and trace them out. The patterns also come with SVG files designed for laser cutting, which is what I'll be using here. Having a laser cutter saves me a lot of time. It ensures the cuts are precise and repeatable. And this Nova 16 has a large bed size that allows me to throw in a large section of hide, or I could use the pass-through slot if I needed to fit the whole hide in at once. Here I'm testing one of the smaller parts to double check the cut settings. At the time of filming I was still experimenting with speeds and powers, and since then I've dialed in some more ideal settings. And I'm working on some videos that will provide a lot of tips and insights for owning and using laser cutters, so keep an eye out for that soon. I've partnered with Aeon Laser USA for these videos, and if you're interested in any of these amazing machines for your own shop, please be sure to use our link in the description to check them out. After cutting, the leather will be scrubbed along the edges to remove the char, but we're also thoroughly wetting the leather for the next stages. When wetting leather, it relaxes the fibers, which softens it up and helps it to accept stretching, forming, and tooling. However, if the leather's too wet, it will not hold those shapes very well. So there's a sweet spot that takes practice to learn, but if you soak the leather and wait until the surface starts to lighten back up, you'll be in the right ballpark. Typically when you make something with leather, you will bevel the edges. This is done with an edge skiving tool, and in this case we elected to skive the underside and not the top of the pieces, just to maintain the sharp edges on the top sides purely for visual reasons. Next we can move on to the tooling. This suit is covered from head to toe in striations. This is a design decision that I felt would make it look more like the manga inspiration. It's easy enough to do, but it does take time. One tip that Ashley had was to wrap your modeling tool of choice with some adhesive bandage wrap for comfort. The lines basically just follow the manga reference for the most part. You're free to omit these details if you wish though. It would be very easy even with just a color change and a little bit of ornamental tooling to completely change the look. This build has a lot of sharp raised areas that we need to form into the leather. One way is to do it by hand, and I have a whole advanced lesson on this process which is included with the pattern bundle. But I won't lie to you, it's a lot of work. Given the sheer number of fluting details over the whole suit, I decided I need to come up with a new method. So I designed this embossing wheel to do 95% of the heavy lifting. I've had a lot of questions about this, and I'm already working on a separate video breaking down how you can 3D print the roller and build this rather affordably yourself. There's still a need to learn the hand techniques though. After all, there will be some small areas that you can't reach with the wheel, and there will be times that you'll want to refine the lines. So for those of you building this as part of our digital apprenticeship program, be sure to put in the mileage to gain the skills for fluting leather. It will come up again in future advanced builds. When it comes to design, one of the things that I really care about is shape. Almost every piece has a little bit of shape built into it. I don't think that a breastplate should look like a sad tube of leather, and leather that is not shaped is missing a lot of potential rigidity. This is one of the ways you begin to harden the leather, because once the leather dries, it will have some memory of that shape. Not only that, it just looks better when the parts are shaped nicely and fit well together. The collar for the suit needs to be assembled, and I suggest doing this before dyeing and finishing the leather while it's still easy to work. As we delve into higher end projects, you'll see more sewing being used. I'm going to use a sewing machine for this, but you can sew this by hand using common saddle stitching. You can also use rivets here if you prefer. First, the stylized teeth are sewn into each side of the base of the collar. This cylinder arm machine cannot sew into pieces this deep, so we'll just go as far as it will allow, and this will be more than strong enough for this piece. If you'd like more details on sewing, just know that I'm planning some related content for the channel and for our academy, and this will be coming once we wrap up some of the active videos in motion. When the two sides are finished, they can be glued and sewn. Each side is glued into place using contact cement. Next, we'll dye all of the pieces. We're using Phoebe's Pro dye for this suit. The Pro line of dye has a little bit of oil mixed into the dye, which helps keep the leather from drying out. And in my experience, it absorbs nicely into the leather. Just be prepared when dyeing leather. It can, or likely will, be messy. We use these trays I found on Amazon to help manage the mess and set the pieces to dry on. To finish the pieces, we'll be using Weaver's Tough Coat. This is an acrylic finish, and you'll often see us use a gratuitous amount of it on our builds. We'll sometimes soak the pieces in the finish. And this is an effective way to add some hardness to leather armor pieces. There are many ways to harden leather though, and perhaps we'll make a video on this at some point. And for those that value the protective qualities of leather armor for things like combat reenactment, hardness isn't the only thing that matters. Using overlapping layers and building shape into the design also plays a very big role in the effective end result, and rigidity also has to be balanced with mobility and comfort. If you want to have more control over the look of the finish, when the pieces are dry enough you can use a scuffing pad to knock down the gloss. To speed up the process, I upgraded our sander to this Milwaukee orbital sander. And now we can move on to the assembly. I would say that the best time to do the assembly is when the pieces have just a little bit of dampness left from the finishing process. However, this isn't always easy to time, and you can soak the pieces in warm water, and this will loosen them back up a bit as needed. How the parts dry is how they will want to stay, so it's ideal to have them dry in their final assembled state. We'll start the assembly with the front of the breastplate. These parts are lettered, and we'll start from the bottom with part D. The front and the back parts do look similar though, so take care not to mix them up. We'll be using retainer straps for this, and the patterns are also included for these. I suggest using a thinner leather, around 3 to 4 ounces is fine. You just want the straps to allow decent freedom of motion without stretching or sagging out over time. For this build we're mostly using medium double capped rivets, which are plenty strong for most situations. We'll use Chicago screws for any areas that need to articulate or that need to be reinforced. I like to use the black finish, but you can get rivets in silver, brass, as well as various antiques and textures. Then we'll move up to part C. Then we'll rivet to part B. And finally, we'll connect to part A. The process to assemble the backplate is exactly the same as the front. Just start with part D and work your way up. The reason we start from the bottom is mainly just because it's easier to access the straps. If you start from the top and try to work your way down, you'll have to fight with the overlapping layers as you go. In a previous video, we made the pauldrons. To connect them to this breastplate, there is a transitional piece, and this will be attached permanently to the breastplate. This may look a little complex at first, and it is definitely an unusual design, but it's pretty simple. You'll just attach the small tabs to the breastplate first, and these are all numbered. Then you'll attach those tabs to the pauldron piece. You can start with strap number 1 at the bottom of the front breastplate around the armholes. Just work your way up, then resume this process on the back plate from the top and work your way down. There's a small trim piece that will join the split in the back together, which you can assemble at this time. The pauldrons we made previously will be attached to the top of the breastplate with 2 small straps each. We may as well knock out the tasseys real quick. The 2 tasseys on the back consist only of 2 pieces each, which are riveted together. These are suspended from small buckle straps on the back plate. There's a dedicated video and free pattern set that focuses specifically just on buckles and straps if you need more guidance on that front. The front tasse piece, if you permit the loose use of the term, will be assembled using retaining straps. The parts and straps will be labeled with reference marks just like everything else. You can start at the bottom with the small tapered piece and then work your way up. You'll use the holes at the top of each piece to connect to the retaining straps. The holes in the middle of each piece are for dummy rivets, which are simply there to increase the visual accuracy compared to the manga reference.
I would say that overall, the manga reference for this armor has a very plausible design. However, the collar for this piece is not very practical. I did my best to make this version as functional as possible, but I also assembled the collar with Chicago screws, which showcases a third use for them, which is removability. Normally you should glue the screws permanently, but in this case I left them unglued, so that if necessary, the collar can be simply removed. Another option to consider is to omit the teeth details on the collar and just use the skull version of the helmet. This is an advanced project. This means that there are going to be many techniques that are assumed that you already know, and that these tutorials will not cover all of the basics. For this, you'll want to start with some of our more basic beginner-friendly builds like the Warrior Fantasy series projects. These are deliberately designed to get you started, and if you don't want to buy the patterns for these suits, you can still watch the videos for free and learn what you need to. But if you still have any questions, please consider joining our Discord, or even just dropping a question in the comments. I'm not always able to reply to everyone, but I do try to read all of the comments, and I think I would like to do a Q&A section for future videos, so ask away. The last thing to do is to attach the buckles. Buckles and straps are one of the more common ways we join parts together and to build in adjustability. The straps are generally proportional to the size of the armor they are attached to. Tasses will get smaller buckles, for example, and the breastplate will get larger ones. We also get these buckles from Weaver. I really like the roller buckles for breastplates. It helps in cinching down the straps. There's an element of preference and personal fit when it comes to the buckle placement, so you'll have to mock up or wear the uncompleted suit and mark the hole locations accordingly. Any straps that are likely to receive higher load should be affixed with at least 2 rivets per strap. This was the last tutorial for building the full suit, but it's not the last video in this Berserker series. There will probably be a few more videos coming up, and we'll see if we can find somebody to model the suit, and I would like to do a big photo shoot with all of the suits in our academy soon. But until then, I leave you with this.